Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back to Biblio Fitness. Hope everyone's having a great weekend so far. It's quite beautiful out here, even though I've been spending my day reading Beyond Good and Evil. Um, that's why it's honestly taken me a couple of days since my last upload because it's been like right from the beginning, it's quite a doozy. I spent, it takes some time to get through some of the paragraphs to really try to understand what he's saying. Uh, I, I'm really glad that I'm back into it. It's really fun. It's a challenge, and I get exceedingly hungry quite quickly. So clearly, my mind is working. But the reason I already wanted to give my first thoughts, even though I haven't finished the first chapter, which is a criticism of philosophy, and really a criticism of ideology in general, to be quite honest with you, these perceptions of the world and so on. I wanted to talk about it before we get too ahead of ourselves, or I get too ahead of myself, because he's about to talk about free will as if it's something that has been disproven. Um, I'm not aware of it, but can't wait to hear what he has to talk about. But for starters, he immediately attacks the whole concept or what Plato started, right? He talks about before the pre-Platonic era, how there was a real thing called Greek tragedy, and that we really understood our faults and understood our inherent natures that society now deems today, like the society today deems negative aspects of the human condition, right? We are aware of our faults. We are aware that these are inherent, behavior constructs within ourselves, but we didn't shy away from it. We accepted it. We accepted who we are, and we made beauty out of it. We made civilization out of it. You know what I'm saying? Harnessing our human condition, not shying away from it. Finding the truth within ourselves, right? And, accepting who we are and striving and all this other stuff, and accepting conflict. But then you have Plato, who displays truth into the thing in itself. Like, you find truth, you find the light by attaining knowledge, and by attaining knowledge you exit from the cave, and you exit from this misconceptions of the shadows and the forms and things of that nature. But that is what began to transition into the constant um, the constant concentration of our efforts into the metaphysical world, because our senses are dulled, our senses are limited. Therefore, there's no way that we can see the world for what it really is. There's this higher truth. There's something that separates us, and that we can somehow get there through the appropriate knowledge. And there's going to be some sort of separation in that. And Nietzsche ends up calling it, goes on to Christianity and how they have their version of what that is, that you can attain the truth on your own, right? The truth is not within you because you are a naturally sinful individual. You have original sin hanging over your head. So you will never be able to get to this truth without the mercy and direction and love of God, right? So that is what began this terrible cycle. I mean, this terrible road that we got down on in terms of this truth. Like, what is truth? And do we really want to know the truth? What is this? Like, why? Like, it's caused so much problem in trying to find what this truth is, because no philosopher has ever been proven to be correct in any of their assumptions. And the fact that we use these terms as truths when in reality we know that they're not true. He goes on to talk about false judgments, for example. How we believe, like, us as a society believe certain things to be true because it's the only way we're going to get society to move, to really understand, to get everything to fit it all together. We have to believe in these certain statements. Even though we know they're false, we have to perceive them and act on them as if they are true in order to make sense of it all. And that's when he really does hone in on the I mean, I'm completely in agreement. I'm in complete agree with him. Is in these truths and these ideals that are chased by philosophers and religion, are a will to power, are a self-preservative measure, are values and and the values and the morals and the valuations that are contained therein, those ideologies and philosophies and et cetera, et cetera, um, are self-preservative measures to ensure the survival of a group, to ensure the survival of a species. Maybe it's even life promoting, maybe it's life breeding. We have all these these truths, these untruths, as he says, that make the basis of our society. And most people don't realize it, or most people unconsciously don't want to see it, right? So he's attacking ideology right from the very beginning. And, one of the great things that I'm glad that I started seeing at the same time was the Russian philosopher that he clowned, Jordan Peterson, a couple of years back. Slavoj Zizek or something like that. He has a movie called Perverter's Guide to Ideology, and they coincided extremely well. How we have these perceptions of the world that keep us afloat, that keep us going, that keep us engaged, and how Nietzsche goes on to talk about, like, the falsity of the judgment does not go with whether we enact the judgment or not. It is life preserving. Um, and once you realize that untruths is what makes the world, your philosophy is going to go past the conceptions of good and evil, because these words in themselves don't really count for much. And he talks about how the abstracts or the contrasts really make it what it is. Like, there's constant striving for truth and love and altruism deep in the reality of it all, deep in the very crevice of it all, is self-deception, a will to self-deception, a will of selfishness and greed. And the reason, and he talks about this, and the reason that I think he mentions that, is because these constant striving for truths is not from an altruistic point of view. They're not altruistic, because Nietzsche is very well aware that these is not our inherent traits as humans. We don't do these things for altruism. We can't live a truly altruistic life. We are constantly looking satisfaction. We constantly looking to alleviate our desires and create new ones. Um, and the reasoning I think that he talks is self-deception, is that when you have these people proclaim that these are truths, that these are the thing in itself, right? That's what Plato started, that there is a truth beyond us, that is beyond our world, that is not scrutable, that is not contained, that is not contaminated by the contradictions in our world, the emotions, that there can't be that the truth can't be just a matter of perspective, that there has to be a truth beyond our realm of perceptions, that is indisputable, to make everything work, to make everything worthwhile. But at the end of the day, truth really is perspective. And it is a matter of self-deception for the very beginning, when philosophers make these truth statements, because you had to deceive yourself in thinking that it was a divine intervention that caused you to have this revelation that directed you into this truth. And it wasn't a hunch. It wasn't an instinct. It wasn't a drive. It wasn't one of those drives that Nietzsche calls, like, you'd be surprised at how many of those drives is the primary drive. And you select one of those drives, and it makes the master of all of them, because the drives or philosophies are naturally tyrannical. You have to make this one facet above all, and they all interconnect to this drive. um, and so I think it is a matter of self-deception, because you're saying that it's divine intervention, knowing damn well that it's not, that it's an instinct that you had, a premonition, or whatever you want to call it. And then you construct reasons to substantiate the claim that you just made. And the reason that you want this call to truth is not because of the community or anything like that. It's for your own selfish reasons. You want to be the guy that has the answers. You want to be the guy that has the way to the truth. Because if you have the angle, if you have control of access to this truth, you can control the world, really. And that's really Christianity, right? We control the way that things are. And if you have this truth, you have in control of the virtues in order to attain that truth. And that's Christianity, right? You have to act the way that we deem fit in order for you to gain access to heaven. These are the good ways to be. And I feel like, and that's the way to access the truth, to get away from it all, to get away from our bodies and the temptations of the world. You have to follow our virtues. The will to truth is the will to power. And once you have that claim and people actually believe it or people actually fall for it, you have control. And it's just extremely interesting, some of the analogies he has in place, like how he talks, one of the main things that he talks about is Epicurus, and Epicurus clowning Plato as a follower of Dionysus, an actor, a fool, a man that just pompous, trying to take control of the scenery of it all. And and it really does, starting to make sense that these constant will to truths that we use as manners of dictating our world, at the end of the day, they are truly a manner of perspective. They are constructed from people in a hole in a corner, as he calls, from their own little very narrow point of view of the world. They get something popular, they fucking blow it out of proportion, and they overgeneralize it to encompass the entire in the entirety of humanity. They didn't look from on high. They had this urge, which is just what these call to truths are, these revelations are, and they just found reasons to expound upon it and make it logical. And logic itself is a matter of perspective, because these are just hunches. These are just something that you are going to construct in your own way in order to be efficacious for you. And he really does think about that shit, like, you even these philosophical thoughts are in themselves instinctive thoughts. You can't separate these things. This call to truth, this truth in itself is not, you can't separate it away from who we are. How can you say that you came up with something divine, something indisputable, if it came in from with you? I'm saying, with your own biases and your own perceptions and your own ideas. It's obviously going to be tainted from the very beginning. And he goes on to talk about Kant, for example, and his categories of morality, and how we found that there is a truth or a knowledge of truth that is separated from us, like a thing in itself, a morality beyond us. And he got it out of a feeling. He found this new faculty in man, this intellectual proclivity, this intellectual intuition that there is a knowledge beyond us, beyond our conceptions, beyond the scruples of the world, the truth in itself, a thing in itself, as philosophers like to say. And he got it out of a feeling. He got it out of something clicked in his head, like an intuition. It wasn't a divine feeling. And that's what really he goes on to talk about. That's really what caused the whole, surge in German philosophy, how people ran into the bushes to find new faculties in man and discover things. And during this era of romanticism, people weren't able to make the distinction between finding and inventing, how they basically coincide. And the fact that Immanuel Kant's like, how did you come up with this absolute truth? How do you know that this is the case? How do you know that, what is a synthetic judgments or a priori? I'm not competent enough to explain it, but I'm pretty sure what he means is synthetic judgments. It's like judgments that are over-encompassing, that don't need your own interjection in order to make that in order for that claim to be true, right? That thing in itself. How do you know that this is the case? How do you know that is to be what in reality it is? And at the end of the day, it's just a hunch from Immanuel Kant. The feeling itself is what caused the feeling that we have this feeling. And he talks about how this is a duplicative thing. Like he talks about a play that they're like, how does opium induce sleep? By the feelings of opium that induces sleep. Like you kind of like reverse the roles of the item itself. And he talks about how we have to like eventually step away from that comedy, that at the end of the day, and the reason that we believe in these sort of things is because they are necessary and they dull the senses. And I really do believe that is how it is, especially with Christianity. When you try to disconnect yourself, when you try to use these truths, knowing damn well that they are not true, as a coping mechanism. He goes on to talk about how some people are willing to die on a sure nothing than go by with a car full of possibilities. And people rather die do that, and that's really a sense of nihilism because you're dying on nothing. You're dying on nothing, but the reason that you're using it is to cope, is to kind of like find sense in the world and not really look at their truth. Because at the end of the day, what Nietzsche is really espousing at the same time is, do you really want to know the truth? Is the truth even worth it? Is the truth really that needed in society? Because clearly it's not. If you really knew the truth of it all, you wouldn't be able to live. These untruths is what allows us to retain function in society. And that's what I think he talks about, with, especially with Kant, when he made this jump, this claim, along with other people, is that, this was a youthful experience. This was youthful. This was ignorant. This was full of energy. But when you throw in these moral indignations and the like, it kind of loses its flavor. And you kind of start rubbing your eyes and start waking up to the reality of it. And I feel like that's what it talks about, like these sort of ideals and these sort of truths dull the senses. It constrains and it construes things in your own, in your perceptions, right? You can't be, and indulge the sense of the terms of also is like, in order to find a way to live, in order to find a way to cope. And a lot of people believe in Christianity, and I really do think Nietzsche is the one that really starts talking about double think, right? All these judgments and these true statements are false, but you still believe them in order to, as a coping mechanism, because you are desperate. The person doesn't know how to do it anymore, doesn't have any hope, doesn't have any, rather, believe in something that is kind of be a coping mechanism. It really is a coping mechanism. It's not because they believe it's true. It's not because they know they're going to go to heaven. It's because it helps them become at ease with the suffering of the world. So it's like a drug, and that's why a lot of people have ridiculed Christianity and religion in general as the opiate of the masses. They confine themselves in this thing, in this fallacy, and make it true in order to find a way to keep going in the world. And that's why Nietzsche constantly talks about how untruths is what makes society, even though it is technically, people act on it as true. It's false. And the fact that even these thoughts themselves, they're instinctive. You can't separate that. You can't separate the fact that all these things and these morals and these values, they are in a way a self-preservative measure to keep something going. And he talks about Stoicism, how they're like, oh, you want to live according to nature. It's like, what do you mean by living according to nature? You want to be prodigal like nature? You want to be disinterested like nature? You want to, like not have any sense of morals and justice and good and bad, not making any distinctions, not being different? How can you live like that? You can't be like that. You know what I'm saying? Because Stoicism itself is this conception of living according to nature, and that's how you behave, whether it's good or bad. But that's not nature. Nature has no concept. Nature doesn't care about morals. Nature doesn't care about good or bad. Everybody dies. Everybody suffers. So for you to be like nature, you would have to be completely indifferent to the point of absolute lunacy. You wouldn't be able to live, because living is living against nature. Living is to be selective and biased, and have valuations on what is good for you and what is bad, not like nature. And he goes, and I feel like that is one of the things that he talks about in philosophy and religion, is that these conceptions of what true is and how to behave, or will to power. It is a person's attempt to construe the world in the manner that they see fit, that is beneficial to them. It's like Stoicism. He keeps talking about, like, you guys have lied to yourselves for so long that you can't believe it. And that's what eventually happens when a philosophy believes in itself. You deceive the world. You deceive yourself when you believe in these ideologies and these philosophies, right? You think of something, and then you construe the world around you to make it make sense. So it's not a truth. So, it's very complicated. I know I'm probably not giving it justice, but it's a fantastic thing. And he goes on to talk about the whole case of will. How there's people, um, what is it? He goes on to talk about the whole I think or I will. And he kind of flips it. Because I think that's when he's going to go to the whole concept of free will itself. Is like now that we've gotten rid of the whole ideology and the fact that these truths are our own biases made truths in order to make the world make sense, in order for everybody to get along. Because if we start considering that truths are matter or relative, and we have this actively in our conscious when we look at the world and its ideology, we're not going to be able to keep civilization together because there has to be rules and lies in place that we can all follow in order to make it all work, right? So we know that's to be the case. But then who is to know that these thoughts that we think is ours? That's what he goes on to talk about the whole, like how some people still think of was it Descartes that he said, I think, therefore I am. And then you have Schopenhauer with I will. And his famous book, The World as Will and Representations. I cannot comment on too much. I've listened to a podcast about it, but I haven't read it personally. It's definitely on my reading list. But no, he goes on to talk about because the one thing that is sure among all metaphysicians is the will. It's like if you are an I, you are an individual from the world. You see the world and you perceive it. You think and then act. You are the cause to the effect, right? And he really goes on to talk about how it's kind of different, like, how we don't think, like, these thoughts don't come when we want, it's when it wants. The thoughts come and then we know it. You know what I'm saying? Like, we don't construct these thoughts ourselves. Therefore, these thoughts came before us. So are we really the cause, considering that we don't even know what we're doing? And how do we even know that these are actions that we're taking? How do we know that we're processing this information and acting upon our own instinct? And I feel like what he is really meaning by this, in a way, like I'm still rattling my brain a little bit about it, is the fact that you are constantly reacting. That's what I think he means. Like, you're not thinking these thoughts, these are reactions. How can you separate yourself as an I, as you in yourself separated from nature? You are separated. You are somehow completely disconnected. That there is no way that the environment around you is dictating how you think. Not you, the world around you. And how everything is interconnected. That's what I feel he means. Like this thing of I think of this. This is complete. Like, my thoughts are completely separated from my environment. He doesn't think that's the case. He thinks that's the complete opposite. This concept of I is a fallacy itself. And that's when he's going to go out and talk about free will, because we don't think these things. A lot of times we're just adapting and we're reacting to the world around us. So I feel like he's saying that we are a manifestation of reactions. I don't know. I haven't finished it, but this is a very, very much of a mind fuck. I really do. I fucking already love this already so much. This is so fucking crazy. How he really is beginning to attack ideologies and what I've always thought them to be, which is will to power. A will to exert force and exert strength. And that's what these valuations really are. And that's what these ideologies are, is to conform people to you. Is to have people act the way you want them to. Is to warp nature in a way that is beneficial to you and your objectives. It's not truths. It's lies that are made truths. It's quite startling, to say the least. I don't even know what he's going to talk about free will. I looked at that and I'm like, fuck. Give me a little bit before I go back into it. I'm really glad I started reading this guy again. I'm pretty sure I missed a couple things, but it's just that really is very astute how he is able to see this. How not even able to see. I think he's just calling it out for what it is. I feel like these are unwritten rules and unwritten agreements we have amongst ourselves. You know, that these giant structures that we use as our way of living are based on lies, but they're espoused as truths because that's the only way we're going to get through them. But then once you start looking at that from a different level, you start reaching a philosophy beyond it all, because these concepts of good and evil in themselves are subjective, therefore they're not real in that sense, right? What's good for you may be bad for me. That's why there's a variety of different truths. That's why there's a variety of different concepts of evil. You know, what may be bad for me may be great for someone else. So it's very interesting how he's really trying to destroy the concept of there's one truth that's beyond our escape, and you can't do that. There's no way to do that. There's no way without you having an active input. And then if you're having an active input, the nature's having an active input because you are relying on instinctive impulses. And if you're a byproduct of your nature, then there really is no truth because you're not escaping the world. I think that's what he's getting at. I think that's how he's like reverse engineering the whole thing. It's astounding. Can't wait to get back to it. To be honest, this is gonna be a fucking amazing ride. I'm set. So I hope you all have a great day. Thank you all for listening. Thank you all for watching. Hope you all make amazing gains. I got 2 more days. Well, I got until Monday. Can have a glorious pool session. Yeah. Love y'all and peace.